Today we're going to be talking about beef stock and how to make it with simple ingredients and make it so affordable. And this recipe you can either put in your refrigerator or freeze. And then we're going to come out with a second video if you're interested in canning it and making it shelf stable. If you're just meeting me, my name is Amy Cross and this is the Cross Legacy, where I teach families how to save money on groceries. And a lot of times that is produce tips and teaching you how to keep a lot of these items fresh that you can use later in something like bone stock. And bone stock is something that is so expensive in the stores right now, and you can make it taste so much better practically for free. So I'm just gonna kind of walk through some of these ingredients and then we'll get to the steps. But you're going to start with some soup bones or beef bones. If you go to your local butcher and ask for beef bones, they'll know exactly what you want. And you want about 2 pounds. Also, if you get a roast and it has bones in it, you can use those bones also, or leftover roast. We buy our beef once every 18 months and we get it from a family farm. I talk more about how we go through that buying process and buying meat in the Grocery Solution course. So if you're interested in getting large quantities of meat at one time, that is the place that I talk about that normally. We are going to roast these beef bones first in the oven for about a half an hour. They don't have to be cooked all the way, but it just speeds up the process of the bone marrow kind of melting into the pan. So you want to make sure that you use a pan that has edges, and all of those juices is going to go into whatever large pot that you're using to make the bone stock. And then we're going to use some carrots. I have whole carrots here. Normally in my freezer, I keep bags of vegetable scraps, and I'll teach you how I do that. But I have made 3 batches of broth now, and all of those bags of vegetable scraps are gone. So these are washed carrots that we're going to use, and I cut off both the ends. I don't like the little end, but I cut off both the ends and they're washed but not peeled. You can use just clean carrots and put the whole thing in, or you can use carrot peels, but make sure that you have cleaned them properly first. And we have a video on how to wash carrots and celery, so we will link that in the description if you're new to finding me. But make sure that you don't use dirty carrots. You want to use clean ones. And then I normally do 1 onion per package of meat that I have. So I'm going to do 2 packages of meat. I have 2 onions. And to get that deep, rich, beautiful color, if you keep the skins on when you put it in the pot, it will actually help darken the color of your broth. So I just cut off the root and then cut it in half or into quarters and throw it into the pot. And then I have these celery tops. So whenever I wash my celery, I make sure that I keep the tops, and I put those in the freezer also with some stalks here. So those are all clean. With the garlic, I just kind of divide it up and I cut the root end off, and then I put skins and all into the pot. And then I have some fresh rosemary from outside. You can use dried rosemary also, and you can put in any other herbs also, like thyme and sage is really good. I almost forgot, make sure that you add a little glug of apple cider vinegar. So I would say about 1/3 cup, and that will help keep breaking down the bones. And then we were kind of laughing about this because I use a big roaster when I'm making this. So if you're making a smaller pot, in the blog post, we'll make sure to have the instructions for a smaller pot. But I use a big roaster when I'm making this because I want to make a lot at one time. But I do a scoop, a handful of pepper and a handful of salt, which we figured out to be, I had to measure it out, it was actually 2 tablespoons. So my handful of what we normally do is 2 tablespoons. And then I have pink Himalayan salt that I add to it. You don't have to add salt to your broth either. So I like it to have a little bit of seasoning in it, but you can totally make it without the salt. But make sure that you add whole peppercorns in it. So again, that's going to be 1 tablespoon if you're only using like 1 package of meat. So for 2 that I'm doing here, then it's 2 tablespoons. And then I will normally take some water and get the last little bits out of there too and pour it in there. So for this size roasting pan, it's a turkey roaster size, and turkey broth is my absolute favorite. So after Thanksgiving, I always save our turkey and make turkey stock in here. And then, or you do the beef stock like we're doing, or you can do 2 chicken carcasses and make a whole roaster of chicken broth in the big one. If you're using like a smaller Instapot or a crock pot, then it would be 1 chicken, like just a whole chicken size, or the 2 pounds of beef bones in the Instapot crock pot. I'm going to turn this up to high until it starts boiling, and then I'll put the lid on it too. And then once it starts boiling, then I bring it down to about 250, and I let it cook for at least 12 hours on 250. So if you want it less time, then do it like 350. But I normally let it cook at least 12 hours. Now we're doing a little bit of film magic here because I've actually been working on this project for 2 days. So there is some stock already ready to go that I made last night in this roasting pan that I'm going to show you how I strain it out. And then we have chicken stock going on here. We're going to can. There's a lot going on in the kitchen today and it's really hot in here, let me tell you. But the biggest thing when you're making stock is make sure that you're paying attention, because we are so used to wanting to keep the items that are in the colander or the strainer and throwing away like the others. So like when you're making pasta, you're thinking about keeping what's in the strainer and you're throwing away, you know, the liquid. Well, the liquid's the gold that we're trying to keep. So I have accidentally gotten distracted before and almost have thrown out my bowl of stock. So just, it can happen. So really think about it and make sure that you don't accidentally throw away the precious gold that you just have been making overnight or for hours or however long you've been making it. The things that I normally use is a strainer or colander will work. And then I have a large bowl. I think it's because I'm short. I don't like using an actual ladle. I have one. I haven't used it in years, but I use measuring cups all of the time to scoop things out. So you're going to see me using a measuring cup to strain the broth. So I'll show you how we take it out of the roaster and do this. I am using a large turkey roaster to make this. So I'm going to have a large quantity of liquid that's going to come, of stock that's going to come out. If you're just doing a soup bowl's worth or an Instapot worth, crock pot, you're only going to need like 1 bowl worth. But since I'm going to have so much, it'll end up being about 2 gallons, 3 gallons of stock. I use my gallon size jar, and when I put the liquid into the jar, the stock into the jar, I strain it a second time, and that just helps get out any of those smaller bits and stuff you don't want it. But you don't have to have a gallon size jar. It can just go into the bowl, and then you can either put it in the refrigerator for 4 days, or you can put it in the freezer for months. I try to make it at the beginning of fall and use it by the end of winter, because I don't use broth that much in the summertime. But you don't have to have all of this equipment. If you're just making a small pot of it, you just need a strainer. I always set these on a plate because you're gonna get broth everywhere. So this has been a whole weekend project, and I forgot to mention that this broth that I'm doing right now is actually the second time that I'm using these meat bones. So as I went through it the first time and got all the liquid out, then I added a little bit more onions and garlic, carrots, celery, and the herbs into it. And this is the second batch that I'm making from that first round of meat that I had put in over the weekend. You gotta really watch the water level, or the juice level. So I need to do one more. This is the second round of using these bones and the meat. So let's see, they're still pretty colors and stuff. We are doing these stock videos as a playlist. So if you haven't watched the chicken stock one, make sure you go and watch that one. But we're also talking about freezing and canning these items. So if you're interested in following this process along to make it either freezer safe or shelf stable, then make sure that you follow the playlist, and also check out the description, which will have all of the recipes and important links for you.